Anyway, Ross Dellenger joins us on the Farm Bureau guest line. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team at Mississippi Farm Bureau. Ross writes at Yahoo Sports. He covers college football and all of the news surrounding it, and goodness knows there is never a shortage of that. Ross, I am most intrigued, without knowing a whole ton about it, with the court decision from the Pacific Northwest yesterday that, at least for now, gives Washington State and Oregon State the opportunity to screw the rest of the Pac-12. Is that true?
Well, not quite. So there's an appeals process, and it's in the middle of that. So today an appeal was filed, and the order from the court that, would give Oregon State and Washington State control of the Pac-12 and control of its assets, which is about $400 million this year, is what they called stayed or delayed until an appeal hearing, is resolved, basically. So soon enough, maybe Oregon State and Washington State will have full control. That ruling a couple of days ago, it's usually a good sign. I say a couple of days ago, wasn't it yesterday? This is my life.
I think it was yesterday, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it was 3 days ago. But yeah, that's a sign. That ruling is a sign that they probably would win that case, and so we're heading toward a situation where Oregon State and Washington State do control the Pac-12 and a lot of money.
I know you are a reporter, not necessarily, well, sometimes a columnist, but you're not a big speculator. But I would love for you to speculate, just if you would be willing, based on what you know about Oregon State and Washington State and the hand that they have been dealt. What do you think the likelihood is that they will be either a little vindictive or a lot vindictive and kind of preserve their own interest in terms of revenue distribution and those assets that you mentioned just a moment ago?
Well, I think something that's been a little overshadowed, we think of the, I'll say the 10 departing schools. Their biggest fear and what they've written in court filings is that Oregon State and Washington State are going to take all their money, right, and they are going to use it to rebuild the Pac-12 by paying exit fees for other schools and other leagues, paying their exit fees so they can come in and rebuild the league, or they're going to use it to schedule games, or they're going to use it for other things that benefit them, when in reality a big portion of what they use it for is all of the litigation that the Pac-12 is in the middle of, and they are in several legal fights. A bowl game is suing them, the Holiday Bowl. Former employees, former deputy commissioner types, is suing the conference as well. The conference is mentioned in the House case, which is ongoing right now. All the Power Five are mentioned in the NCAA as well. It's a case over retroactive NIL and athlete compensation to players, TV revenue to players. You're talking about billions of dollars. They're mentioned in the NLRB complaint, National Labor Relations Board, in the middle of trying to decide if athletes are employees of the Pac-12. So there's a lot of litigation as well. So my speculation would be they're probably going to keep some of that, but probably not all of it, and probably not a majority of it, I would not think, because the judge, the way he ruled last night was, look, you got to treat the others fairly, or you'll be back here in court.
Yeah. So they're not going to have the ability to say, hey, all of you departing members, your revenue distribution from the conference for the year just completed is $17. Congratulations.
That would be a surprise. I think that would probably get back to the court. And that would not be good for them. I think that would also probably trigger like a separate another lawsuit from the departing 10. I think the judge's words were something like, this is a sort of a limited preliminary injunction, so you need to treat them fairly, and I believe you will treat them fairly and not harm them. And if you do, the court will hear about it, sort of thing.
So, Ross, speaking of the Pac-12 on the field, there are some landmines that still exist that could potentially keep a Pac-12 team once again out of the college football playoff. How worried are they about that on the West Coast? You've already got Oregon with one loss. You've got Washington undefeated, but they're actually an underdog at Oregon State. You could potentially have a rematch with Washington and Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game. Are they worried that despite all of the good that has happened on the field this year, that they could look up and have a result just like the result of the last few years?
No, I think the Pac-12 lives in worry these days. I covered the Washington-Oregon game out there in Seattle. And I remember in the press box somebody mentioned to me, or I was overheard them say, and at that time, this was like, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, at that time, the Pac-12 was rolling. It had got out to the best start in conference history, basically. Had like 4 undefeated teams, right? And like four or five teams ranked in the top 15. And this person up in the press box basically said, "Oh, don't worry, Utah's going to ruin it all. They're going to, pull these upsets randomly throughout the season, and we're not going to have a team in the playoff." So they were already worrying, and I definitely think they should be worried because Washington has certainly shown that it is beatable, right? Against Arizona State, against Stanford, it struggled. Utah gave it a run this past weekend. And they have, as you mentioned, at Oregon State, and they get Washington State, a big rivalry game that's at the Palouse. And then they'll play Oregon in a Pac-12 championship game. And I think a lot of people would say that Oregon right now would probably be a decent betting favorite, at least 3 points, maybe 4 or 5 against Oregon in a Pac-12 championship game. I do believe that. So it is setting up that we'll have a one-loss Pac-12 champion potentially kept out of the playoff.
Visiting with Ross Dellenger from Yahoo Sports. I'm fascinated with the Heisman race right now. Normally I don't really care that much about the Heisman, but here's my fascination. Jaden Daniels put up ridiculous numbers last week for LSU, and everybody seemed to pay attention, even though that was a game that was broadcast only on the SEC network. The remaining opportunities for Jaden Daniels are this week in a throwaway non-conference game and then against A&M in the regular season. Meanwhile, you've got a showcase game for Washington out on the West Coast for Michael Penix, probably a couple of them. Bo Nix is going to have opportunities. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have opportunities. If you believe that Carson Beck is surging late, he's going to have national television opportunities. Can Jaden Daniels win this simply based on being the best player in the country, even though he is very limited in the opportunities that he's going to have between now and the end of next week to be fresh on people's minds?
Well, to me, it's not even about limited opportunities, too. It is about how the team is doing, and that does limit opportunities, right, because he won't get a conference championship game. So I think it's even more about that. I think you bring up a good point, and that's probably why you don't often see Heisman Trophy winners from teams that have lost more than, say, 1 or 2 games. You don't see it very often. I think if you go back, I think RG3, Robert Griffin, is one of the ones people point to, one of maybe the only ones in the last 2 decades or so that was on a team, a Heisman Trophy winner on a team that lost, say, more than 2 games. And I think they were 9-3 that year. I want to say Baylor, and in teams that played for the championship that season, they didn't have players who are like we're seeing this year on championship caliber teams like a Michael Penix, right? Like those guys, it's going to be hard. Or Marvin Harrison Jr., as you mentioned, and maybe even Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy, although he took a hit this past weekend. It would be hard certainly Jaden Daniels is going to go to New York for the ceremony, and I do think probably he'll make the top 3 on the voting. But it's going to be really hard, I think, for him to be. He needs some other things to happen, right?